Cowboy, get that man out of that jug.
He say he not Kong. We make him say he Kong.
He can't say anything if you drown him. Now get him out.
Yes, sir, Major. Inste man.
Senora! My fight con Kwamp.
Cowboy,
He lie, Major. He goddamn bastard.
put him back in the cage, you hear me? God damn it, Cowboy, do you hear me?
Yes, sir, Major. Inste me.
Okay, so this clip that we just saw is there are a number of things going on. First of all, we've got Cowboy, who is the major figure that we are going to focus on as being representative of the Vietnamese. Now, he's an experienced South Vietnamese soldier, and he's been fighting the Viet Cong, which he says they Kongs are presumably all his life, and he knows what he's doing. So these are the people you have to pay attention to when you arrive in the field. Remember that the Americans are here as advisors, and they are here to advise the South Vietnamese how to fight the war. However, Barker, the major, is not happy with the fact that they're prepared to torture, let's say, and this is an early version of waterboarding, sort of. And then Cowboy threatens him and threatens to kill him with his knife. And there's a direct standoff between the two forces, basically, where the American says, Cowboy, you will not kill that man. And Cowboy, that's a direct order, and Cowboy backs off and says, yes, sir, Major, instama. And he says instama a fair amount. This is, again, part of the colonial heritage, that the Vietnamese inherited the things that made sense to the French when they were colonizing. So the South Vietnamese, who are against the forces of communism, and the French also fought the communists, were interested in looking like their colonizers, the colonizing force which was friendly to them. So they adopted their dress, the tiger stripe camouflage, and they picked up some French, which we will see in a minute. And so there's this curious combination linguistically of Pidgin French and Pidgin English and Pidgin Vietnamese that the Americans are going to learn ironically, from the Vietnamese. So the Vietnamese will have learned French from the French, some, just a few words, instantly, do it right away, too much, too little, and so on. And they will put in their own, and they will put in Vietnamese with it. And then when the Americans arrive, they will put in some English. So they will combine basically what they can get of English that's easy and quick. Number 10, number 1, number 10 is terrible, number 1 is the best. Okay, sort of basic Americanisms. And they will put it together with Vietnamese, which of course they all understand, and they will also put it together with some Pidgin French. And the Americans will then pick it up, and they will start to use the Pidgin French that the Vietnamese are using. So they will say, adding English to it, things like "too beaucoup," it's too much, too very much. So it sort of is this interesting linguistic mashup that happens in the 60s in Vietnam, produces this Pidgin, which people can sort of get along with, they sort of understand. So Cowboy is an ARVN soldier. He is the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, right? South Vietnamese Army. And he's here torturing VC, but he respects the Americans who are the bosses, and so he stands down. Now he warns the command line that there's trouble, which we'll see. Okay, so that's enough. That's enough for this little piece.
I sorry, sir. I say to Corporal Corsi, these communist people,
It's their war.
This next piece is very short, and it shows Corsi coming to the realization that this is not the American war, and this is something which he has to, if he's going to survive, basically, if he's going to sort of not drive himself crazy, he has to accept that this is the way the Vietnamese are fighting, that there are guerrillas, and that they have to kill them. And if that means killing children, girl children, which is the complete, at this point, the complete anathema to the Americans. You do not kill children, and you do not kill girl children, especially. As a male, as a white male soldier, well, really any American male soldier, no. And this goes for most soldiers. Killing children is considered to be a crime, and it is a crime. It is a war crime. Okay. So, but what's important about this for Corsi's is that he says it's their war, and Lancaster, the major, observes this and is sympathetic, and he sees that this indeed is the reality that the young soldier must accept.
Comment allez-vous, Major?
Very well, thank you.
A drink?
Always.
To the U.S. of A.
I thank you. To the Republic of South Vietnam.
Ah, merci. Merci beaucoup. Please, sit.
Thank you. You tell the colonel, if he gets his hands on the ammo, it's his forever.
Drink?
As with all this, as was this whole movie, there's a lot going on in a small amount of time here. So here's the meeting between the regional, would have been provincial, probably he wouldn't have been the provincial director, he might have been, who is, looks European. I mean, that's the point here. And so here comes Barker to make a deal. And what he wants is the man, the politician, we'll call him a politician for want of a better word. He wants him to supply artillery, and he's gonna produce. The American Asa is going to produce the shells for the artillery. This is very expensive. And remember that at this point, the war is not American, it's Vietnamese, and so he's going to bring the shells and leave them with the provincial chief. That puts the provincial chief in a significant position of power, because if he doesn't like something, he can wipe out a village. So it gives him local control, which is very good for him. So it's a win-win deal for him. I mean, all he has to do is drop a few shells on, in a firefight, no problem. And the major just wants to be sure that he's going to get support. This guy has the artillery. Here comes the shells. Okay, so we see here the three Vietnamese people in the room who are running things are all dressed, well, they're dressed in a variety of clothing. The two men are dressed, one in the sort of height of what would have been mod fashion at the time. The other one is dressed like a businessman. And then the woman is dressed in the traditional Hawaii Vietnamese garb, in this case, which would be made of silk. And what's interesting, though, is that although the bosses, basically the political bosses, English is good. I mean, it's very good. And his French is good, too. And he probably would have been sent to France to have been trained by them as a bureaucrat. So, again, this is part of this French colonial heritage. So he... and this was, the reason the French did this was, not because they loved the Vietnamese, but because they wanted the place run. They wanted it run by Vietnamese for the French. So they was like, okay, well, we're gonna bring them to France. We'll give them proper training. They'll learn French. We'll be able to interact with them, and that's what That's how colonialism tends to operate. You bring in your own language, you bring in your own ways of thinking, and you bring in your own, what Jacques Ellul would call your technique. In this case, the technique of double entry bookkeeping and running a business, basically running a political office like a business. All of that stuff is happening. And then at the very end of the clip, we'll just let that run. So what you hear is that, again, this combination of languages, some French, some English, but eventually, when it comes to discussion of the strategy and the actual what's going to really happen, then the woman, who is obviously a better English speaker, translates into Vietnamese for the provincial chief. So clearly, the point here is that it's open corruption, and Asa knows this, and this is what makes that character so, I think, completely believable. Is that he's like, oh yeah, it's corrupt, but I here's what I need. I need you to drop some shells. What's it going to cost me? Oh, you want to keep the shells? No problem. He's a very pragmatic individual. Okay, I promised I would talk about these last two little screenshots, which I focused on. And which I highlighted. The issue here is that in this office they have stockpiled two things. There are boxes of something from 3M. Could have been anything that 3M would have been providing, and teacher's whiskey. So the local politician here is doing a business, and he's either stockpiling the whiskey for himself, or he's using it to bribe the village chiefs who would be underneath him to get them to do what he wants, and so on. The supplies from 3M are perhaps more, well, they are, it's all part of colonialism, basically American colonialism. So 3M at the time was, like IBM, one of the big blue chip companies. It still is. I mean, it's just massive now. It's a transnational, it's a multinational, which we don't really hear about because it's gotten so big. But it's Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, 3Ms, right? MMM. And so that the logo, the 3M logo, is just so clear, and it's so bespeaks here. It's like having somebody, open up an Apple laptop and check their numbers, and you're like, oh yeah, they've got money. In this case, there's a relationship between American industry and this provincial chief, who is in the bag with American industry. So they are giving him what he needs to make sure that the country, this part of the country, stays friendly to America. Okay, that's what that's about. And the fact that they put this in the film is really smart, and you are not to miss it. I mean, everybody would have looked at it. Oh, hey, look at that.